Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by Nate Weitzer. He's on the East Coast, and we are looking at 9 games here on Wednesday to choose from. We've got best bets up in this video. Also have play of props as we do each and every weekday. So make sure to subscribe to that page. Continue to follow along all season with us. Also head to thelines.com. Use everything we're putting up on the site for you guys right now. Nate, let's go ahead and just jump right into your first best bet. It's a game that maybe we didn't think we would be talking about. I doubt either of us are going to watch much of it, but we do have Cade Cunningham and the Pistons hosting the Raptors.
Monday I said I'm taking the Pistons for the first time all season, and apparently I'm going back to back with that as they just are -3 here at home against a depleted Raptors squad. I love the money line parlay here with Orlando, who you mentioned on the spread, -7 against Brooklyn. I think there's no chance Orlando loses the game there, so if you are looking for a dance partner, that's a solid option. But I mean, the Pistons can cover 3 here, certainly if they win, because Toronto's defense has been so bad that there's plenty of room to pull away here. They've already ruled out Scotty Barnes, RJ Barrett, Pirtle, Boucher, so not much rim protection there. I mean, we talked about it prior to that Nuggets game on Monday. The Raptors do not want to finish better than 7th in the NBA, because then they will lose their draft pick to the Spurs. So they haven't highly incentivized to lose. They're coming off a nice spunky bid for an upset at Denver, where the players are not trying to lose. Of course, they're just the management is of course trying to just put a team out there that doesn't have the greatest chance. And then sure enough, the champs turn around and outscore them by 23 in the second half, take care of that business. You know, their last 4 without Scotty, they are now -16 net rating, lost all 4. They're 2-13 on the season without Pirtle, and Quickly and Gary Trent are both questionable for this one. If they play, I mean, that does hurt their defense more. Otherwise, they can throw guys out there with more length, like Jalen McDaniels, guards to frustrate Cade Cunningham and company, force some turnovers, because that's been the biggest issue for the Pistons, is when they don't take care of the ball, the other team gets out, and that's gonna kill them. But lately, I mean, their last 4, they've been really solid. I will say they've covered in 3, 1, 2, and they're allowing the second fewest fast break points per game, which is obviously vital when you play Toronto. That's where they score. They're also the number 1 rebounding team in the league by a mile, number 2 offensive rebounding percentage, and Toronto is 30th in defensive rebounding since the All-Star break. So Jalen Duren and company, after bullying Charlotte 2 nights ago, have another opportunity to do so here. And I mean, got to shout out our guy, Simone Fontecchio, right? I mean, as far as like them taking care of the ball more, having an adult in the room, as Josh will always tell you, he's had a couple really nice games in a row in this last 4. I mean, maybe he's the most essential piece, scoring 17.5 a game, just 1 turnover per game, and 134 offensive rating. Picked him up in the fantasy league. I think he will be a nice stretch player down the stretch here as he kind of fills in the sidekick role alongside Cade, who, by the way, Toronto also gives up the most assists to point guards in the last 15-30 games. So Cade should have a good game here, and Detroit might win back-to-back games. Wow, fantastic.
Wow, what a time. What a time to be alive here with Detroit. I concur. We were both on this one together here, and it's almost stinky to me, the fact that this is still at +3, and maybe everyone's waiting for Emmanuel Quickly and Gary Trent. Obviously, I do think they're worth a couple of points if both of them are out. I mean, I would love to consider an over with how bad these teams have been playing defense and how fast they've been going, how consistently Toronto goes over on the road. But if Gary Trent and Emmanuel Quickly are out, who do you trust to run an offense for Toronto? And even if Gary Trent plays and Emmanuel Quickly's out, who's getting Gary Trent the ball to catch and shoot as often as he does, right? I don't know. I don't know that there's going to be much to limit Cade either, to the point that you were making. Maybe they can throw some guys on him with some length, but it's still, we're talking about pretty much backups at this point. So I agree with everything. The transition should be there for both teams, to be honest, if Detroit actually wants it, as Toronto's also poor at getting back. But not much to add there, honestly. You kind of nailed it, and I'm with you on that one. A game that we lost a little bit of steam on this. Last night I hit this at under 237.5 for the Dubs and the Mavericks in their game and the total, but I'm still willing to take the under 233.5. That's about where I stop. I do think this one is good for like 230, maybe 232 in that range is kind of where I would project it. So it's a little bit closer than I would like compared to that 237.5 that was ripe for the taking. But this one has moved in favor of the Dubs a point. They were a little bit worse off there for where, and now they're at, oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Still plus 7.5, not much movement, but still right around what it opened. But either way, I think that the concept, it's Chris Paul, that's what we're talking about here. Let me just say Chris Paul and not Steph Curry, right? And those are the stark differences here when you start with the way that this team has played over the course of, I mean, you can't even really do its last five because Steph is such a big impact. He played in 3 of those last 5, hasn't played in the last 2. You look at the last 2 and they go from, first in the league in pace over their previous 5 to bottom half of the league in pace in their last 2 games. Why? Because Chris Paul, you come in and play point guard with him at the helm. We're talking about them playing more at like a 99 pace versus about 101 that they were playing in the previous 5 with Steph in there. The offensive rating with Steph in there was pretty good for those previous 3 games, but then you come back down to earth here in the last 2, back to about 22nd in the league in that offensive rating category, playing a lot slower. And, despite how these teams have played each other in the past with their high totals, it's just much different guys that we're throwing out there now. I still believe in the Mavs' ability to score, to be honest. I'm a little bit nervous just taking the Dubs. I know you like them a bit more than I do in this one, but I think that the correlation of under and Dubs covering is a good one from the standpoint that they're going to just try to grind this thing down, right? Like Chris Paul cannot afford to have this game have like 103, 105 possession pace where they're just trying to trade threes. It's not going to be the way that they're able to do this without Steph in there. That's a big reason why I don't actually like Klay to necessarily get his numbers in this one as well, is because the fact that I think there's not going to be enough possessions. He needs straight volume. And what we've seen without Steph in there is that teams are willing to sell out on the 3-point line against a guy like Klay, specifically against Klay, right? He does have some success against Dallas, but really it's more about just what he's done this season without Steph in there. And it's more of an inability to get his shot off. We've seen Chris Paul actually dime up dudes like Trace Jackson Davis and Jonathan Kuminga way more frequently than he is looking for other guards, right? He's playing a lot of that pick and roll action that's gone up for them in terms of the percentage of plays that they're running that offense with Steph, without Steph. With Chris Paul, it's going to be more consistently because Steph might run that pick and roll option at the top of the shot clock and really look for that as the first option. But if he doesn't get that, they're not just running screen after screen for him. He's passing and cutting. Chris Paul's a lot different, right? If he doesn't get the screen action that he wants off the bat, it's going to go right back to it once he gets the ball at the top of the key, which is what we've seen the last 2 games from him. Has most passes received on the team, most passes made. And the receive part is really what tells me a lot of the fact that he's just resetting the offense whenever he wants it, but what my eyes tell me as well as I'm watching these games. So I don't think the Dubs are going to have an easy time scoring despite playing against this Mavs team. We have seen them struggle against guys, say what you want, like Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively when it comes to limiting centers and their ability to get offensive rebounds and their ability to obviously close possessions, where the Dubs have relied on second chance points. And in the last 10 games, Dallas has gotten much better at limiting those numbers with Gafford and Lively both in there for them. So I think 237 is way too high. I still think you can get some value under 233.5. I know maybe Nate likes a little tease if you are 233.5. Maybe you can take the Dubs plus 11.5 and take the under 237 to get back to the original line. But what say you on that one?
No, I've kind of come around here on the under being the play that covers more scenarios in terms of like the Mavs could win this game by 10. It could still go under. But yeah, what you said is if you're going to take the Dubs to cover plus 7, I think you parlay it with the under. I don't think you necessarily need to tease it. I just think, yeah, there would be such a strong correlation between the Warriors being competitive in this and keeping it around a 220 total, because it's Chris Paul led team, and that's the kind of the expectation of the pace and the style of play that we'll see. So yeah, I think you get some good juice there for sure, taking the underdog, and the recent results have kind of correlated with that, even with Steph in there when they played this team. So I will take an over. Chicago at Indy, and always a little scary with the Bulls. They kind of play slow, but I'll get into some of that more. But it's not scary taking it over with Indy, especially on a back-to-back, right after a win in OKC, which was a hard-fought, competitive game that was soaring to the over until the fourth quarter, where it kind of bogged down, and a lot of energy used on defense by the Pacers to get that dub. Now they're back home where they play faster and they score 7 more points since the start of February, and their defense is 6 points worse per 100 possessions. And like I said, on a back-to-back, their last 5 back-to-backs have averaged 248 and been played at a 103 pace, much faster than we've grown accustomed to when they have Siakam in the lineup here. And I mean, it's the new look Pacers. You think like they are a little lower scoring when they're running more stuff through Siakam and less pace and space. But first of all, the Bulls are going to force them to shoot threes. They force everybody to shoot threes, right? Highest attempts in the league, and they're giving it up in terms of assisted threes and points since the All-Star break. And I think their cross-match power forward defense, which we talk about a lot, is that Caruso guards the power forward, is going to be an issue against Siakam, who's just like the weird combination of slithery, quick, and has size to kind of get by Caruso if that is the matchup they go with. He's shooting 75% on paint touches since the All-Star break, 51% overall. And he sees more usage on back-to-backs, really going back to his last couple of years with Toronto. But this year, 26% usage because he's a guy who's in phenomenal shape and can go on back-to-backs. Halliburton also sparks up to 27.5% usage. Love him if he doesn't have Caruso on him. Love him creating against this Bulls team that's space and space. And that's the thing. Like they play at a slow pace, the Bulls, 94, 95 sometimes. But this lineup that's become their biggest lineup, most used lineup, with Ayo and Caruso is playing at a 101.5 pace. And they're also scoring a ton off assisted threes, hoisting more threes than you would associate with a Bulls team, right? With Kobe White shooting very well. They actually have much better shooting splits on the road versus at home since the start of February, scoring 115.5 in these roadies. And yeah, they were pretty hot before they got stomped by Dallas at home. Now they get right back on the road where they've found a way to be in all these games recently. So I think they'll be in this one, and that's enough to get us over in Indy.
That's going to be it, right? Are the Bulls going to keep pace with Indy? It was an interesting game last night for Indy where I could see Rick Carlisle speeding things up against a team in this one, but slowing it down versus the Thunder, right? Like I think they're okay with playing the opposite way of the way the other team wants to play, right? Like OKC was playing so fast at home, and Indy doesn't switch, right? They don't really send doubles. They don't really over crowd guys like SGA was a reason why we kind of targeted his assists under last night. I think it's going to be the same concept here where it's like they're going to let dudes go, and if DeMar's going to get the opportunity to do his thing, I think he should be in line to get some points tonight as well. If they're not going to send two guys over on him, I like his ability to take on pretty much anybody. If he's taken on, like if Obi gives him a run at it. Now that they don't have Benny Matz in there as a guy that was guarding a lot of their best wing players. Obviously, Bruce Bound at one point would have been a decent matchup for him. And now I'm not really sure that there is nearly as good of a matchup for him. And like I said, for Indy, I think it's worth it for them to speed it up in a game where they know that Chicago can only really play in the half court. But they have been willing, that we've seen that willingness from Chicago as of late to get out and run with sort of that 3-guard lineup, if you will. If you want, whatever you want to consider Alex Caruso, whatever you want to consider DeMar DeRozan, that's sort of the way that they've running this team on offense. So let me close things out with what you mentioned earlier with that Orlando and Brooklyn game. Brooklyn is a team I have about as much respect for as I do for Toronto right now as an NBA team. And I hate to say that about our guy, Kevin Ollie. I don't know that he's long for the head coaching job there in the NBA. We'll see if he's able to keep it or get another one off of this. But we've seen some problems from the Nets. And, the only thing that scares me about this game is like, they're kind of the heatish in that sense. It's like when they're supposed to win, they don't. And when they're not, they do. That's been most indicative when they played teams like Charlotte and Detroit recently, right? Which they've given up one of those aforementioned wins to Detroit over their last 5. But for this one, I'm still like, the numbers just tell me I got to take Orlando. And the first thing I'll throw at you, we haven't been trends guys, I don't think, this season or even really most of last season necessarily. But I do think that when you see something as stark as 20-5 against the spread as a favorite for the Magic in terms of covering, I'm going to feel pretty good about that. And that's including them winning those games by an average of 11 points per game, a little bit more than that, right? So they're handling business against bad teams, kind of like the New York Knickerbockers as well. Maybe they're the Knicks of the Southeast Division, if you will, in the East. But it's been the same concept for them. And really what I'm looking for in this game is like, are they going to take care of the ball? And I think they're going to be a lot better at it than they have been as of late. They're going to have Markelle Fultz in this game. They're also going to have Jalen Suggs. Both those guys have been crucial for them in the starting lineup. They're both helpful for that defensive rating for sure. But I really do want to give Markelle Fultz some flowers for a minute, because they've shown a propensity to basically just need him in this season, especially. Their defensive rating without him is 114.5. With him, it's 110. And their ability to guard everything above the break, everything out on the perimeter in general, from wing to wing, has been really dependent on he and Suggs being in there, but especially Fultz. We've been giving Suggs a lot of credit for the defensive, basically the defensive prowess that they show around the 3-point line, more so this year than they were last year. They're still vulnerable against certain point guards, and the thing that the only way I see this bet going haywire is Cam Thomas does Cam Thomas things that we can't control, and all of a sudden he's just making every tough contested shot in the game that he takes, or Orlando's turning the ball over a ton, and that's, like I said, why I like I feel a little bit more comfortable taking them with Fultz in there. They turn the ball over a bit more with him off the floor than with him on it, and with him out of the game rather than in it, obviously. But this defensive rating for the Magic is what I'm looking at. They limited this team to 81 points last time and ended this game in the third quarter. What was it? Just a couple weeks ago now, where they played in Orlando. And the two wins that Brooklyn has had, and the way that these games have actually gone a little bit higher scoring, which has favored the Nets, is when they played in Brooklyn. But when they played that last one in Orlando, and that dates back to last season, we see Orlando taking care of business, which has been the case for them in general this season at home as well, with the nice splits that kind of favor them much more so when they're at home. The only other thing I would say here is, like, this is at a 205.5 total, right? Some people bet this at 206.5, if you will. But with that in mind, like, I do think that goes in favor of the Magic. I think that the Nets, despite the fact that they've also been playing at a slower pace, I think that what we're going to see from them is, can they get out and get back on, get into their offense before the Magic can set up their defense? Because the Magic half-court defense has been somewhat impenetrable. And if they decide that they want to sell out on guys like Cam Thomas and Mikal Bridges, especially out above the break, then they're going to be able to do that and not really have to worry about what's going to happen down low, as there's really no force going to the basket for this Brooklyn Nets team anymore, not really getting to the foul line enough. They're just relying on turning the other team over when they can, getting out and shooting those threes in transition as well. And I don't know that that's going to be available to them, like I said, with Fultz and Suggs out there for the Magic.
Yeah, I think those guys are key, because Schroeder has actually been a pretty good spark for the Nets and has helped pull off some of these upsets where we don't expect them to win. But I think if you just take him seriously, so to speak, and like put an actual dogged defender on him and say this guy can beat us, which the Magic will do. Like, they don't give it up to anybody. So I think they can shut down this offense. And yeah, you mentioned Mikal Bridges' worst game of his career, maybe, against the Magic last time out. Actually, the previous trip to Orlando last March, he had 44 and they still lost by 12. So yeah, that was when he was at like a really good, in a really good place career-wise, and now he's just struggling and they're juicing his under, and it's just like, yeah, we don't expect him to do much of anything in this matchup.
Agreed. Yeah. So that is all the time we have for you in this one, though. Continue to follow along. We've also got those player props up for you today, as we do each and every weekday. So until we see you next, happy betting.